Hey, Professor Lam, thank you for coming in. You just have a wonderful uh, history of accomplishment and contribution across so many different areas. Definitely one of the best in the world at what you do, and spanning whether it's translational research to heading up programs to doing all of the marvelous work you do. And you're rare in that you cross with industry and government and executing it across so many different levels. So definitely one of the best in the world. I would say you're the best in the world.
Thank you, Stephen,
There's
for your kind compliments.
So thank you, Professor Lam, for coming in. And Professor Lam, if you don't mind, I'll use kind of a shorthand with you, calling you KY, if that's okay with you.
No issue.
So, Professor Lam, you've done so much in the world and have such a marvelous history and such a wonderful career and continuing to do so. So, what are three inflection points in your life that made you who you are today? And it could have been when you were, like 3 and 5 years old. It could have been somebody in your family. It could have been something outside the family, mentors, and so on. I'll give you one example. I recently interviewed one of the top CEOs of about 10 companies, the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And he said, Stephen, it was actually my mom got divorced and she didn't have much money, and I had to get a paper route. And he said that taught me about self-sufficiency and working hard and things like that. And he said not to be, stymied by challenges. Another lady I interviewed, she said when she was 10, she visited an open pit mine that her father owned. And that really kind of transformed her thinking. So it could be anything that, really shaped who you are today. So what are those three magic inflection points in your life?
Okay. I think the first is during my days doing national service when I was in the military. Okay. So I'm used to, in a way, a lifestyle where it's quite, it's not hardship. So when I went into the military, of course, the physical part of it is a bit too much for me. And in a way I have to struggle a bit. Okay. And that also taught me that actually sometimes in life you encounter things which are not what you want to do, but you just have to persevere. Okay. So that's basically one of the thing which make me who am I today, that there are challenges in life, and it's always taking advantage of the challenges, because every challenge will have an opportunity. Okay. So my opportunity came when I went to Imperial College London to do my undergraduate study. Okay. And I'm by myself alone in London. Uh, Used to being with my family. We are quite a close family. So that makes me be more independent. And also because the funding for my undergraduate degree came from my parents, I have to make sure that I do well. And indeed, of course, so from day one at Imperial College, I kept pushing myself, and that led to me getting accepted by MIT to do PhD and master. And of course, the PhD program at MIT is very, very difficult. During my time for mechanical engineering, for every two student PhD candidate, only one around one would pass the qualifying exam. So it make me, especially a foreign student, make me very nervous. And of course, I have to keep pushing myself. And from then on, I'm always somebody who push myself and of course get things done, which is very important. I think a lot of time people will come up with good ideas, but the execution part is the most important part for things to be done. Okay, no point to have good ideas and they are not executed properly. Okay. So I'm always, you can say that I'm always a 24/7 kind of a person. Every time I get a WhatsApp message, I'll respond to it immediately. And attention to detail, I think for myself is very good, which is very important because my portfolio is quite extensive. I have to remember some of the key things which need to be done over the next few days, over the next few months. So that's basically who am I.
So that's a remarkable. I mean, you're used to not initially having, a lot of hardship. And so when you went into the military, which was mandatory, right? You had to do some mandatory military training, and you had to experience environments that you weren't used to, and you just had to persevere and kind of tough it out. And that was a big lesson for you. And
Yes,
then
okay.
and go ahead.
So you can say that in the military, for me, when I first entered the military as a young 18-year-old boy in that sense, the environment is not controlled. There's no way I can control the environment.
That's right.
And so I have to adapt to that environment. Okay. But now in the university, when I'm doing PhD, in a way, the environment is I'm very much in control because I know exactly what I want to do for the next year, next month, and next few years. Okay. So once I'm in that situation where I know exactly what is going to happen or what I can do, then I'm very comfortable executing it.
Yeah, but that base where you got into a really difficult environment and you just had to be resilient and just work through it, that was a really transformational point for you, right? So you had to draw upon resources, your inner resources, and then you worked really hard to get into Imperial College, which is, one of the finest institutions in the world. And you wanted to do well because, as you indicated, your parents were funding this, and you wanted to do them right because they were creating an opportunity for you. So you worked really, really hard, and through that hard work, and you're in a foreign environment, and you would have to adapt to that foreign environment, and you're alone. So you learned resilience, you learned to form relationships, you learned to work really hard. And those hard lessons there then got you to MIT, which is one of the most difficult programs in the world, and where you got your master's and PhD. So, and that really consolidated this aspect of hard work, dedication. And then, as you indicated, you learned early on that you have to execute. It's not just about having ideas, because, people probably are flooded with, 30, 40 ideas, maybe 100 ideas a day, but it's actually doing something with some of those ideas that ultimately create success. And that's been a hallmark of your entire life, is always executing, taking action. And you indicated you respond and you keep track. You got a wide portfolio, it's very demanding, but you keep track of the major key points and you stay on top of it and you respond as well. So those are all hallmarks of a remarkable journey that's continuing and having outsized impact. So I can see now the different elements of what make you, KY, this remarkable person in the world today.
So thank you, Stephen. Okay. Hard work is very important, but you also have to always be looking out for opportunities. And of course, opportunity comes when you're exposed to meeting more people along the way. So always make it a point to network, to interact with people, whether it's a student, a professor, a vice president, or even CTO of a company. Because without this network, the opportunity would be less. Okay, so let me give you an example. We have a big corporate lab program with Rolls-Royce Aerospace. It ended about 2 years ago. It's a 10-year program. That program would not have been possible without me being involved with Rolls-Royce many, many years ago when I was in A-Star running the Institute of High Performance Computing. That was around, if I recall, around the year 2000. And our corporate lab with Rolls-Royce started maybe 2012, 2013, 13 years later. Okay. So sometimes when you do something, 10 years later, what you have done may actually make it easier for you to get something or make it very difficult. Okay. So always look out for opportunity. That's basically my so-called principle in life, working in the university environment.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is you're always looking for stretching yourself and
Yeah.
and looking at sort of the next frontier. So you're always looking for opportunities and doorways, but you have to work to get through those doorways. But you also realize the value of relationships, and you talk about the experience with Rolls-Royce, where you developed some relationships early on, and then that had an impact later for doing more work. And that could be colleagues, it could be industry people, and then it could be 5 years later or 10 years later, because you're always looking for building, going through those doors, creating those opportunities, maintaining those relationships, being at the frontier, in essence, being willing to take some risk to move forward, and also looking at new kinds of ways to um, learn. That's opened up a variety of pathways for you, and it's on a continuing basis. And those are good lessons for the audience.
Yes, okay. So of course, when you are given an opportunity also, you have to execute well and to deliver, because it can backfire on you. If assuming that I said in late 1990s, early 2000, when I worked with Rolls-Royce and I mess it up, then there'll be no more opportunity. So it can cut both way. Okay. So basically, make sure that things move smoothly. Okay. If sometimes you work with companies, you work with organization, or you just do basic research by yourself and things don't work out, if it's because it cannot be achieved due to some technical issue, I think it's okay. People understand. Research is not always 100% your guaranteed result. Okay. But things don't work because you mess it up executing it, and you are not reliable partner, then it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life or your career. Okay. So it's always a two-edged sword. It can cut both ways.
Yeah, and you being willing to enter those doorways and to work hard and to be very diligent to
Yeah.
maximize the opportunity and mitigate the risks. And as you indicated, there's never a guarantee, but you've done all that you can to make the variables work in your favor. So in other words, then you're going to get more successes than things that don't work. And sometimes the things that don't work is just out of your control, right? So you're always maximizing the things that you have the ability to control.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So one other thing about getting things done. So far, you have asked me is basically all about myself. Okay. But the key ingredient for success, especially when you're working in a big program, is teamwork is key. So you need to bring your colleagues along with you. When we are talking to some organization to propose a project, you need to bring your colleagues along. And then when that project is given to the university, you need to make sure that your colleagues and yourself work together as a team. Okay. No point to be someone with good ideas who can execute, but there's nothing to execute if there are no professors, scientists with you in the execution. So bringing people is very important. Okay. So managing people, I think, is one of the other key thing you need to have, managing a big program. If you are a professor doing a project where you are the only PI, you still need to have good relationship with your student, with your staff. Okay. So whether you're working on a small project by yourself or a big program, working with companies, working with other organizations, working with other university, teamwork, managing people, I think is other key factor for success.
So and you've got such an so illustrious career, now leading to your current position. Can you maybe in a 5 minutes or so just kind of describe the career progression of the different positions you've had, and then we'll focus on your current position and the projects that you're overseeing and why they're important, and how NTU is positioned. If you look at the pure metrics, it's really one of the top institutions in the world. In fact, ahead of the ones that people particularly think are ahead. You're actually ahead of them if you look at pure metric numbers, right? So.
Okay. So my career actually started after I graduated from MIT. I joined the National University of Singapore. That was in the 80s. At that time, very few PhD students, almost no postdoc. Okay, but I think from what I've learned from MIT, you need PhD students, you need postdocs to succeed. So luckily for myself and my colleagues at that time, the government emphasized research, and there were fundings for PhD students as well as for postdoc. And I quickly tapped into those funding scheme, managed to get PhD student, but at that time mainly working with PhD student and postdoc. And I think my first break was because at MIT, I was actually funded by my professor to work on a project which involved many companies. Actually, it's on hydraulic fracturing. So companies like Esso, Mobil, of course now it's called ExxonMobil, Shell, British Petroleum, funded my project. So as a young research assistant, I have to manage relationship with the engineers from those companies. And I realized that actually doing work with industry is very exciting because when I'm doing hydraulic fracturing, it's not just the translational applied work which I'm doing, but there's also a lot of basic research involved. Okay, just for your information, my project is actually I was the first to develop a 3D simulator for hydraulic fracturing. It involved computational mechanics, computational fluid dynamics, some fracture mechanics, numerical base. I managed to deliver. And of course, when I joined National University of Singapore, I realized that working with company actually is good. And at that time, Motorola has a product development facility in Singapore. I quickly established relationship with Motorola, and that led to a program by Motorola, basically on drop tests for pagers, not handphone pagers. Those were the days where pagers are the in thing. And of course, later on lead to mobile handphone, okay, where I use my basic research knowledge and then translate to something which Motorola interested in. And with that, I also set up a Center for Computational Mechanics, and then it got upgraded to an Institute of High Performance Computing, still under NUS, and at that time was the National Science and Technology Board. And very quickly, I think from then on, I started to attract research grant, mainly for myself. Okay. Then when I joined A-Star, of course, Institute of High Performance Computing, we work with companies. And after many years at A-Star, I joined NTU, and that's when I have to bring in grants with my colleagues for NTU. Okay. And that is my current position where I'm the Vice President for Industry.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. You learned early on that it was really exciting to work in conjunction with industrial research groups, right? And then there's a real practical element to it when
Yes.
you're working with industry groups. And I can see why then your career has this kind of tight integration with industry. Can you talk about some of the major projects that are being led at NTU and why NTU has, if you look at a pure metric standpoint, really you're number one in the world. Can you talk about some of those numbers, but then spotlight some of the various programs that you have at
Okay.
NTU and that you're part of?
So when you look at the subject ranking for US News and World, those are of course based on hardcore bibliometrics. NTU, we are ranked number one in electrical engineering. We are ranked number two in computer science AI. We are very well ranked in energy. We are very well ranked in chemistry. We are very well ranked in condensed matter physics. So subject ranking basically based on basic research output and impact. Okay. But those are also the subjects where we have worked very well with companies. So my message is that working with company is not at the expense of basic research. The two coexist. And that's the reason why our professors from engineering faculty and also from the science faculty are very keen to work with companies. Because when they work with company, they can see impact in basic research. But at the end of the day, they can also see some of the results, some of the work they are doing being translated to adoption by the company, either in their processes or in their products. And I think this is something which many professors in NTU, in engineering and science, are very excited. And of course, when you do basic research with translational applied research, you also have patents, intellectual property. And of course, for some of the faculty, having patents may allow them to have a startup company. And of course, now the in thing for many countries, for many professors, is in addition to doing work, basic research and applied research, they can start up a successful company.
You know, and it's a remarkable journey that you're leading and you're instrumental in creating at NTU. And as you indicated, in these different areas, you have top ranking or amongst the top ranking. Can you give us some examples of some of this work that you're doing, like specific examples that you can sort of talk publicly about?
Okay, so for Hewlett Packard, we have a corporate lab on digital manufacturing. And of course, that's extremely important, especially as rising up from COVID, where there are constraints on people working physically. I think now digital manufacturing, smart manufacturing is an in thing where you can actually increase your productivity. Okay. So that was one of the projects where there's a lot of impact on the economy. And at the same time, the professors can publish their work in good journal and get well-cited papers.
So,
And we, yeah.
let's sort of drill down deeper then on digital manufacturing. Can you give an example of how that could be implemented? What are the different aspects in digital manufacturing that can help different manufacturers around the world? And of course, you have the Singapore Manufacturing Federation there as well. So you must be working with some of their members, I would think, and there may be global entities that are interested in working with you as well.
Okay. So one example of digital smart manufacturing, of course, is 3D printing.
Right.
Okay. It has a potential to produce things faster and maybe better quality and more reliable, where there's a lot of science, a lot of technology involved. And then when you finally do the manufacturing, the reliance on actual people working will be less. And you can see now many factories all over the world are increasingly using robots, using technology to improve their output, and in a way, rely less on actual production workers in a factory. And also, it's in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
You can do 24/7, and there'll be no fatigue as well. Okay, and that also lead to some challenges for many countries, because the skill set now required to manage to operate a factory is very much different than, say, 30 years ago, which rely a lot on human capital, on people actually working in the factory production floor. Now you actually need computer scientists, you actually need engineers to man the factory floor.
Let's delve deeper now. I do have an interview upcoming, just right after yourself, actually, with Paulo on the 3D side, which I think would be really interesting to delve into that deeper.
Yeah.
On the robotics automation and things like that, do you see humanoid form factor being something that's in the near term, or do you think that's going to be a few years away? And I'm just thinking of things like you have NVIDIA that came out with the World Foundation model, their Cosmos World Foundation model. You have AGI World, they come up with some kind of open platform. You've got companies like Atlas and Figure AI. They came up with a new vision language action. They call it the Helix model, which tends to have this kind of ability to generalize. You have Unitary making some inroads, and there's so many others. Do you think in the near term that the humanoid kind of form factor is realistic in a factory, or will it take a little bit longer than some people are thinking? Do you have a sort of a time frame, or is it going to be the sort of the typical assembly line robots that we see right now?
I think it will still take a while, but things are moving very fast. This thing called Industry 4.0, 5.0, 3.0. When Industry 1.0 moved to 2.0, it took almost 100 years. From 2.0 to 3.0, also about 100 years. But then when it goes from 3 to 4, it was quite short. And from 4 moving to 5 is even shorter, maybe 20 years. Actually, we are now at the age where I don't call it Industry 5.0, I call it intelligent age. Okay. Intelligent age basically means you need a lot of computer scientists, you need a lot of engineers to make things moving. But there are also issues in terms of acceptance by society on some of the things people are coming up with. And that's why in NTU, we also have a social science school, quite a good social science school. We need to look at the impact of such technology on society, which is not unimportant. Okay. So in terms of humanoids and so on, being so-called mainstream manufacturing and so in effect production floor, I think it'll take at least maybe another 5 years or more.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting, and I had a discussion with Bernard Kozla about this, and he's kind of very forward thinking in terms of where it's going to, how it's going to be part of our sort of reality. And in fact, I was telling my wife the other day when I was going for a walk, I said, you realize I could probably buy a robot today that will walk with us, right? So, and I can converse with us. And so, but, a factory environment, you have to have reliability and it has to be to interact safely with workers if it's a humanoid form
Yeah.
factor and, have it generalized and things like that. So I think a 5 year time frame is sort of a reasonable sort of
More than 5 years. Actually,
yeah.
it's more than 5 years. I think it'll take for. I think the acceptance by society will be key for successful implementation. Yeah. I
And
mean, imagine yourself waking up in the morning
right.
and then you have a humanoids or robots making coffee for you. You're talking to the robots. You have to get used to it. And
Yeah,
you also have to accept that it's actually 100% reliable. Because anything which is programmed can go wrong.
right.
You do not want the humanoids, the robot helping you now to become a so-called a threat to you. So society acceptance is something which is key for this to be, I mean, implemented on a global basis.
So we
Like,
talked
just
about
like an autonomous vehicle. Same thing with autonomous vehicle. It will still take a while for society to accept autonomous vehicle, and it's mainly the safety issue.
yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, in parts of the U.S. they have rolled out autonomous vehicles, right? And they're already on the streets. You'll see this in Asia and things like that. So you have these pockets where they're so mapped out that they're allowing them to be out there. There's these
I think
other
time will tell. Time
yeah,
will actually tell whether or not it's going to be it can be scaled up.
right.
Okay. Imagine yourself in a taxi which is autonomous. There's no point. I mean, there's no issue going from point A to point B. See, for me personally, the issue is that when something goes wrong, you need the driver to change something, to change direction. Then you are not very sure whether or not that autonomous vehicle can adapt to your requirement at that point in time. Okay, so assuming that I mean somebody's in an autonomous vehicle going from point A to point B, along the way he or she thinks that he or she has heart attack. If you are in a normal taxi, you can just ask the driver to drive you to the nearest hospital.
Yeah.
But in an autonomous vehicle, I'm not sure whether you can trust that the autonomous vehicle, when you give the command, will bring you to the hospital. Okay. So I think and then the safety as well. Who is going to be responsible when there's a fatal accident or when there's a serious accident? Unless those issues are worked out, it's not easy to scale it up.
Yeah, and I guess those are great questions, and it's the scaling aspect where it becomes pervasive, requires all these challenges to be addressed. Now, your school has all these different other areas where you're leading or amongst the top. You talked about electrical engineering. You're ranked amongst the best in the world. You're very much ahead in AI. Let's talk about electrical engineering. Can you give some examples there, or if not, perhaps in the AI side?
Example of what?
Oh, working with industry where it's really transformational. You can see having great impact the work that you're doing with industry.
I think many of our projects with industry have led to technology pull through. When I say technology pull through means from the joint lab which we have with company, the results are used in the production facility or in some of the products and some of the processes of the company. But I would not want to go too deep into the details because you work with company, you can understand there are a lot of issues or things which we have done very well, which cannot be publicized because the company needs the competitive advantage.
Right.
So unfortunately, it would not be possible for me to actually give the specific details. Okay, but the key thing is that if company comes back to NTU after they finish one phase of their project, that's the indication that they find value working with NTU professor. Okay. So very good example would be with say a company like Scheffler, where we have gone through two phases of collaboration. Okay. Phase one is 3 years, phase two also another 3 years. So if they came back to NTU for more work, that is an indication that we have actually delivered. And that's also an indication that our professors find value working with company because they have very good publication, they have patents, and some of them even thinking of doing startup.
Um, because some of your professors are doing startups and you're publishing papers and you're also doing patents, we could talk maybe about some of those areas because they're already public, right?
Yeah.
And the startups would want some kind of recognition for how they're innovating. On the AI side, you're one of the leading research groups on the practical applications of AI. Let's explore that a little bit. Uh, are you sort of in the kind of the Jan LeCun school where there's kind of like a dead end on the LLMs, and he figures to go further, you're going to have to go more to like a world model, and he's right now working on joint embedded predictive architecture. He calls that uh, JEPA, or are you more in the school of things like what OpenAI is doing, or what Jeff Hinton, is now talking about and saying that these things are going to exhibit some elements of AGI, artificial general intelligence. In fact, a research team out of OpenAI, at least one or two, anyways, they just came out with a kind of a general paper, just sort of saying in 2027, I think, or 2028, that these things are growing so quickly in their capabilities that then we have to be a little bit careful. And so, where do you stand on that? Do you think these are going to go like Anthropic? That's Anthropic CEO is always saying that, like within the next year or so or 6 months, we're going to get into this level. Or are you more like Jan LeCun, where it's going to be a few years yet? And what are your thoughts in terms of the, kind of the published work that you're doing at your school?
I think mix, I mean, you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. Okay. And our faculty have experience in many areas.
Right,
Uh, they come from all over the world, train in some of the top universities in the world. Some are working on things which have big impact. Some working on issues which may take longer to develop. Okay, but we do not have faculty just in one area. Okay, I mean it's not just a research. We are talking about. There's also the education part. So when we hire professors, it's not just for the research. They are good in one area. They also need to be able to teach to the undergraduates.
right.
Yeah. Okay. So shouldn't put all your bet in one particular area. We are not a company. We are still an educational institution. So in a way, as an educational institution, we need to make sure that we cover many areas and we take in many students.
Right. Yeah. And then so you got to make sure that the coverage is broad enough to fit a number of different areas and ensuring that you're giving coverage that's useful when your students either if they decide to continue to do
Okay.
go into research or if they go into industry, they have enough skills that can be applied across a broad range of needs and so on.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe I also say that even though my current position is VP for industry, where my focus is on working with industry and also on some of the flagship program, the NTU professors are free to to choose whether they want to work with industry or just to be a PI by themselves working on basic research. Okay. So they are free to choose what they want to do. And we have a mix of professors and they are equally contributing to NTU, to Singapore, whether they are just doing basic research and that's it, or they are doing a combination of basic research and translational research. Or for some faculty, they are just focusing on their startup. Okay. We do have a scheme where faculty, when they have startup and they feel that they need the next 2 years to actually spend full time working on a startup, they can actually get a leave of absence from NTU. Okay. So we don't have what I call one shot fits all model. Okay. We cater to the needs, expectation, aspiration of faculty.
I you have an interesting incentive program for your faculty, and I'm not sure if you're able to discuss any of that publicly, but I thought it was fascinating. I mean, it's to me, it's so unique, and it ensures that your faculty are incentivized to really stay current and to be productive and things like that. I think it's a pretty unique model. Are you able to discuss any of that? In private, you discussed it, so I thought it was really interesting. I don't know if you can discuss it publicly or not.
So in terms of startup and so on, it's not under my portfolio. We have a vice president for innovation and enterprise. Okay. But I can say like most university, not just NTU, we do offer incentive for the faculty member when they do startup. Of course, first thing, of course, is it's no open secret. When they take a license out from NTU for their startup, we cannot be charging them a high licensing fee. I think they'll go bankrupt very soon. We also make sure that when things are successful, they get to own as much as possible of the work they are doing in the startup. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, we also provide them an option to be on leave of absence from NTU just to focus on their startup and their faculty position is guaranteed. So after 2 years, if for some reason they decided that they want to go back to NTU, totally no issue.
You're leading in so many different areas. Are there areas that you want to spotlight in the remaining minutes we have that we haven't talked about yet?
Areas which we okay. So one of the challenge for any university, for NTU and so on, is to predict ahead of time. Okay. So one good example is that many years ago, AI is not the in thing. Okay, I think that was in maybe around 2015, 2016. AI is not a big thing. Okay, but we managed to make a bet on AI when in 2016, 2017, we realized that actually there's a potential for AI. And I think we make the right bet. And now NTU is very well ranked in AI and computer science. So areas which I think will have an impact. I think quantum is one area. I think a lot of emphasis now on quantum. I call it disruptive technology. I think if quantum can be successfully implemented, and that it'll take many, many years, it's something which I think it will be a big impact on society. Another area where I think we have gone into is fusion, nuclear fusion. I think that will also have a big impact on the so-called energy requirements, green energy. Okay, so these are bets which you have taken, and of course, it's a calculated risk. But even if it's not successful, the professors doing work in those areas, as I mentioned, they still can contribute to the science, making an impact. And sometimes when you contribute towards the science impact, it may be 20, 30 years later where you can see the results. Okay, so we need to be patient sometimes. Okay, a university is still a university. We cannot be looking at short-term gain, unlike many companies. We need to plan. Maybe we need to be more, what I call, willing to wait 10, 20, 30 years. Because some of the things done today are research which have been done 20, 30 years ago, where for 20, 30 years, there's no commercial impact at all.
Let's explore these areas a little bit deeper, but more in a general sense, right? And maybe something you don't wish to get into, but and you can say so because it's hard to predict, right? But do you have a sense then where AI generally is going to go? Do you think we're like Anthropic CEOs and some others are saying that we're going to hit some elements of artificial general intelligence? And what I mean by that, it's sort of like the best of us. And
Yes.
on a longer time horizon, it'll be like super intelligence, though better than the best of us. Do you think that that's and it seems like when I interview people who are in this area, they all believe it's going to happen now. It's not going to happen. They believe it's going to happen, and they're not thinking 2100 anymore or 2200. They're thinking, is it going to be 20 years, 5 years, or is it going to be 30 years, something like that? It's not this long time horizon. It's a much shorter time horizon. I'll give you one example. I had a great discussion with Jeff Hinton. I interviewed him earlier this year, and he said, Stephen, if I look back 10 years, I would not have predicted where we are today. He said, uh, he said, I would have thought that would be many, many years into the future. And I don't want to represent what he's saying, so they can go to the ACM and they could just look at that conversation. But he definitely thought it was many, many years into the future, 10 years ago. And he says, you know what, it's rapidly progressing. Do you think that those aspects of an AGI is going to be 15 years out or 10 years out, or do you think it's going to be in the 5 year time frame?
I think to me, the situation is very fluidic. Maybe the science is there. Maybe in 5, 10 years, those things can be successful in terms of the science. Okay, but for me, still, I think the society acceptance is key to
Right.
whether or not AI. There's no issue that AI will increasingly be used, but at the scale which some of the scientists and so on, engineers predicted, uh, it's very difficult to predict now. You cannot have a case where AI takes over almost all the jobs.
Right.
Well, what are we going to do? I mean, it cannot be that we are staying at home. You need people to work to create value to the economy. There will be a big issue if the world is run by AI, by robots. And I think the issue is quite real. Okay. So, of course, many scientists are very upbeat about this. But my sense is that there have to be some moderation and there have to be a total rethink on what we want to get on the outcome. So that's basically what I have to say. Okay. It's an uncertain future. A
Yeah.
lot of challenges ahead.
Yeah, I mean it's just interesting because I speak about this all the time, right? And from a futurist standpoint, and I follow people like Sakata, and they come out now with their second version of their AI scientist, right? Which is trying to automate scientific discovery, and then Google's working on some kind of research tool that will work with you, not sort of alongside you, and can do longer term, kind of almost help you in your research and you see Project Mariner, which is going. In fact, it's already released or soon to be released when Google had their Google I/O. So I mean, it's really kind of fascinating how these things are evolving and using. I mean, I actually purchased Google Ultra, which is
Yeah,
their top subscription model because the tools are just so useful, right?
yes.
And I did the same thing with OpenAI and Pro because I just find the tools are so useful. So, and
But you still need many years of work on it. I mean, one example is I use ChatGPT on myself, and about 80% of the information are accurate. The other 20% are just garbage.
yeah, that's true. It
Okay.
can be
So
wrong.
you still take, I think it's still a long way before it's a 100% or 95% kind of accuracy. But as I said previously, there's going to be a lot of impact in terms of jobs and so on. And would countries in the world accept a situation where the requirement for manpower is very much reduced? I think that's the big issue.
Have you tried testing the deep research tools now, which are agentic, right? So they'll actually go out and they'll call up a code. They'll actually write code and execute code. They'll surface and explore websites. They definitely do this kind of chain of thought autonomously, right?
Yes.
And so you can give it a problem and it'll go away and work on it for a number of minutes. And there's been really fast improvement.
No.
Um, even DeepSeek has released an upgrade to their R1 model to compete
Yeah.
with OpenAI's O3 model, but Gemini has their 2.5, and I can see 3 coming up, and they're working with something called Google Diffusion. And it's just fascinating. I find that these deep research versions, these tools that are now available, are much more accurate. And uh, Compared to if you don't add this deep research tool capability that's now being released, I mean, Anthropic has the same thing, right? So um, you mentioned quantum, and I interviewed not too long ago the founder of Quantinuum, and they just signed an agreement with Singapore. So
Oh,
it's interesting where quantum is going. And I remember back in 2015 when I was helping a bunch of CEOs, and I indicated you're going to have to think about quantum over the next, let's say, 10, 15 years. You're going to have to start thinking about this thing. And I remember some coming back and saying, no, if ever, it could be 2100. But I would say the majority of people out there are thinking it's not 2100. It's going to be in the much, much nearer time frame. You mentioned quantum. What are your feelings on that? And this would be probably the kind of the last exploratory question, and then I'll ask you for sort of your recommendations to the audience. That'll be the last question. But do you think quantum is this far kind of scale area, or do you think it's near term? And I'll give you another example. I interviewed the director of science of Oak Ridge National Laboratories, and they came up with the first exascale supercomputer, but they are also working with all the quantum providers and they're integrating it, right?
okay.
They're even working at an orchestration level so that it can, in these hybrid systems, and they indicated it got AI kind of infused into everything. And he went public with this. He said, JP Morgan, for example, he said, Stephen, they just did an optimization test using the quantum capability within under Oak Ridge. So do you think this is going to be nearer term? You saw Microsoft
I
and
think for specific application, it can be near term,
right,
next 3 to 5 years. But for general application, general computing is still quite far off.
right.
Okay. And all those things that we are talking about AI and so on, we also have to be mindful of the fact that it's using up a lot of energy.
It's true.
Okay. So green computing is also something which NTU is doing. I think it's very important. You cannot have, I think right now I was told, all the computing taking place in the world, the energy consumption is more than all the cars running on oil and gas, basically on petrol. Okay, so the green part, the sustainability part also have to be taken into account. We cannot just keep increasing the number of data center. At some point, there'll be an impact.
Yeah, but you're working on fusion, right? And then
That's why I say fusion is potential disruptor, this disruptive technology. And of course, when that is fully commercial, then there will be no issue. Okay. But at the current stage, I think there's the demand on the compute power is just growing, to me, a little bit out of control.
yeah, but then you have the data center people looking at nuclear reactors, right? Small modular nuclear reactors, things like that, and the new chip technologies, the new kind of materials use less energy. But that would be another kind of topic area. We only have time for one more question, and that is, from your perspective, what kind of advice or recommendations or questions you want to leave the audience in closing? So we know you're a top center and you're working on so many different areas where you have global leadership. So I recommend the audience. I have a lot of investors and CEOs in my audience. They should explore all the capability that your institute has, right? NTU has, and look at collaboration or working with your group because you are world leaders in so many different areas and explore further. So I recommend that. Do you have other recommendations you want to give to the audience, or maybe a question that you want to leave the audience?
I think for the audience, for those from industry, my message is consider working with university. Of
Yeah.
course, not just NTU, with university. It's very important. Our examples working with, many examples, successful examples, NTU working with industry, with company. I always say 1+1 is more than 2. When you work with university, the professor brings in the basic research experience. And then if the project like what we have for our corporate lab is with company as is under joint supervision, the company engineers and scientists will bring in the company, the commercial perspective. And this handholding by company, scientist, engineer, and NTU or university professor will produce the best in terms of basic research, in terms of technology transfer, in terms of patents, and in terms of startup. So please consider working with university. And university, of course, also have access to talent. And there are many bright students willing to put the next 3, 4, 5 years of their life working on a particular scientific project. Okay, and they are the best source of talent. They are the young. They are very productive, and they are in a way not afraid of failure. Okay, when you do a PhD, you always know that what you aspire to do, your philosophy, your hypothesis may not work. So in a way, when you start off as a PhD student, you're already accepting the fact that it can lead to no PhD. Okay, so I think it's very important. Companies work with university. Okay, and for those who aspire to be an academic, a professor, always make sure that you do well in your basic research, not forgetting also about the education, the teaching part. Okay, and once you do well, you're recognized for your work in basic research. Then you have the credential to approach company and tell them, look, this is my area. Perhaps we can work together for the next few years to do something where both of us will gain. Okay, so for professors, focus on your basic research first, and then later on do the translational research. But important message for the professor, don't forget the students, especially the undergraduate student, because the undergraduate student could be your future PhD student.
Those are great words of wisdom and pearls of wisdom based on your decades of outstanding contribution. So, Professor Lam, thank you for coming in. And really, I recommend my entire audience to listen very carefully to all of the pearls that you given to the audience. And it's because you're outstanding and you continue to make these global contributions and definitely a shining star. So, thank you for coming in and doing this interview with me.
Thank you for spending time with me. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.